Hey viewers, my name's Kara. Today I want to talk to you about books, but I'm not going to tell you the names of any books or any authors. And here's why. So, I have decided recently that as a new rule that I'm going to follow, if I love a book and I recommend a book, I'm going to tell you about it. You know that. I do that all the time. Anyway, most books I read I like. Lately, I have been making myself read in their entirety, or at least look through enough to really have an idea of what's going on, because I don't like talking about things if I really have no idea what's going on. Like, how can I have an opinion if I don't know? So I've been making myself read / look through / discuss with other people things that I otherwise would never read for myself, because I know at a glance that I don't like it, that it's not something that I think is good information or that I think is helpful. It's not something that I need on my path, kind of thing. So these kinds of things that, you look at the bookstore, you pull something off the shelf, you're like, no, and you put it back. I've been making myself read some of those things because a lot of people are talking about some newer books. A lot of people are recommending a lot of books that other people are vehemently not recommending for very specific reasons, like because they're problematic or just because they're not very good books. There are much better books out there. And so what I've decided I'm going to do with this is I'm going to rant about the general patterns of things that I see that I personally am not vibing with, that I'm thinking are like not so great, not helpful. But I'm not going to name any specific names because I believe in internet algorithms. Okay, I know how they work. I know that if I tell you, oh, I hate this book by this person, and the first thing thousands of people are going to go do is Google it or Bing it or whatever search engine you use. The first thing everyone is going to do is look it up. And when you do that, it pushes it up in the algorithms and makes it easier to find for other people. It essentially puts things higher in the search results. Just like when you Google something, the results that show up first are probably the most relevant, but really what's happening is the results that get listed first are the ones that people click on the most. So if people always click on the first result of the page, it's going to stay the first result. And I learned that back in college in like a how the internet works course. And ever since then I've been like, okay, so now I scroll down a little bit in Google to find what I think is really the most relevant website to what I'm looking for before I click. Because I'm weird like that, okay? But so I know how algorithms work. I know if I say something like, oh, this book, I don't recommend it, it's not helpful, you're all gonna go look it up and read it. So like, what's the point? Why am I bothering to tell you? So if I love a book and I highly recommend it, I'm gonna tell you about it. I always have done that, you know that. And in the past, I have reviewed some things that I don't like, talking about like, oh, look at this horrible thing, and responding to some of the misinformation in them, stuff like that. At least for right now in my life, I don't want to do that anymore. I'd rather just, if I don't like something or I don't recommend it, I don't think it's helpful, I am not going to utter its name because I'm not going to give it any credence. So, as a general rule going forward, if there is a book out there in the world that I haven't mentioned, it either means that I've never heard of that book, and therefore I don't know anything about it, or I may have heard of it, but I haven't read it, and so I have no opinion to give, or I've read it, and I don't want to talk to you about it because I don't recommend it. So yeah, what I want to do in this video is talk about some general patterns that I'm seeing in some new stuff, observations that I've made, seeing people talk about some new things, discussions that I've had with people one-on-one telling me about their experience reading certain books and stuff like that. Okay? So that's what I'm going to do. I have a list in front of me. It's going to be really haphazard and all over the place. It's going to be a bit of a ramble. But essentially, if you're following me on Instagram, you've already heard / seen me rant about some stuff. And just like as I'm reading things, just being like, what is this? Okay, so one of the main things that I'm noticing about some of these newer books that are coming out, is basically that they do a really poor job of actually explaining anything. Like, that's a big thing that I've noticed. Here's the general pattern seems to be that a lot of books now want to do things quickly. They want to give you spells immediately and ones that you can complete very quickly, because they know that people are busy. Our lives are busy. And so sometimes, and people have asked us about this on the Pagan Perspective collab channel a lot of the time, so I know this is a valid thing. A lot of the time, people who practice these paths that really require a lot of work and a lot of attention, we feel like, oh, I'm too busy to meditate. I'm too busy to do a ritual. I'm too busy to redesign my altar. I'm too busy. And so then we kind of feel like we're not taking part in our spirituality and our spiritual path and our religious path. And so we kind of let it go. And then people end up asking the Pagan Perspective, like, what do I do when I feel like I'm not spending enough time because I don't have time? Does that mean I'm a bad pagan? Does that mean I'm a bad witch? Whatever. So I understand that reasoning behind some of these books and other sources, other types of media that are like, here's something you can do in 5 minutes, because they want to remind us that even when we're busy, not every ritual has to be a 3-hour process that you've spent 5+ hours planning and 2 hours shopping for, That doesn't have to be the case. So a lot of these practices, it's helpful. They mean to be helpful. What ends up happening, especially if the books are marketed toward beginners, is that they cut right to the chase of the thing that you want to be doing. And so it'll be like, here's your spell, say these words, less than 5 minutes, you're done, you're doing magic. And so if that's the first thing you ever do, where's the explanation behind it? Where's the background? Do you know why you're doing any of those things? Do you know why you're saying those words? Do you know why they said to do it during this moon phase and on this day and at this hour? Like, none of that is explained to you. Those books are good for people who have been on the path for a while, or people who have been studying it for a while, who have gotten all of that information from other sources already. And so you can then pick up this book, and when it says, do this spell at this time on this day in this moon phase, you already know why. You already know the symbolism of the moon phases and how you feel about them. You already know the symbolism of the days of the week and the months of the year and the hours of the day and blah, 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 everything that we could possibly use as a correspondence. You already know why they're telling you to use this color, right? We already know. But when that approach is taken in books that are marketed toward beginners, there's not a lot of substance to them, and there's very little, if any, explanation. I've looked through a lot of books recently and read some in their entirety that are like this, and I found myself filling in blanks in my head, okay? So I would go through and I'd be reading, and all of a sudden something would be mentioned, and I'd be like, wait, what is that? Was this explained? Hold on, because if I already knew something, my brain would fill in the blank. Oh, I know why it's that day of the week, or I know why they're using that herb. I know why this, that, and the other thing. But then I was realizing, wait a second, this concept has never been mentioned in this book. Has it? And then I would go back and see, and I'd be like, no, this concept has not been addressed in this book at all. So I'm like, And they're also not recommending any other books for further information, because I understand a lot of this information is repeated stuff. It's basically like a collective, worldwide, multi-part series Book of Shadows reference, right? Of like modern neo-paganism stuff, right? because obviously it's not specific to everyone's individual paths. But a lot of this stuff, a lot of the basic correspondences and things like that, you can find them in a lot of books. So some new books might not want to print the exact same stuff over and over because it's in every other book out there. But the thing is, they're not all recommending any other books or telling you, like, you can learn more here, or there is more to learn here, or I wrote another book about this, or whatever. Some of the sources, some of the new books that I've been looking at don't include any sources. They don't cite any of the information that they're writing about. They don't even have a bibliography in the back to tell you what other sources they have used for the information in the book. So sometimes I'll be reading through a book and I'm like, okay, all of a sudden they'll give you a spell or they'll give you a chant or an incantation or something, and it'll reference something really obscure. And I'll be like, what the hell is that? What does that mean? They didn't explain anything. So then I'll Google it, and sometimes it's really hard to find because it's really obscure. Like something recently I read, it was referencing something, and I Googled it, and it ended up being like a Catholic women's society. And I was like, what? Like that has nothing to do with, okay, no, that can't be it. So me being someone who does a lot of research, and I've literally taken courses on like how to research on the internet. Like we had to learn this stuff in my undergraduate classes in college. So I learned like how to research and how to use search terms and keywords and how to filter and get the results you want. So I'd put in different keywords and I eventually found what this thing was referencing. But it took me a while. And because I know that there are a lot of people who are much less computer savvy, who are not doing a lot of research constantly about obscure pagan-related topics like I am, I know for a fact that there are people in my life who would not have been able to find out that information themselves. People ask me to Google stuff for them a lot because of that, and I would rather teach people how to Google than keep Googling things for you, because that's a lot of time to be taken. And that could all be solved by authors of books telling you what they're talking about when they talk about it. You know, like, I shouldn't have had to do a Google search to find out what this obscure reference in an incantation meant. Why are we saying it? If you're giving me a book that says, say these words, if it references something else, I want to know what I'm referencing before I say it. So that's just me. I know that not everybody would look that stuff up. So that's just an example. A lot of stuff not being explained. I've also seen stuff like, it'll all of a sudden mention the chakra system, but then it doesn't explain anything about it, doesn't tell you what it is, or how to learn more even. And sometimes it doesn't even list all of the 7 main chakras that we talk about. There was one that I looked at that listed them out of order and didn't list all of them. And so again, I can fill in that information in my head because I know about that. And a lot of the rest of us can. But because I'm looking through these books as like, do I recommend them or not, especially for beginners, if they are marketing that they are suitable for all levels of experience and all levels of knowledge, then I'm reading it with the point of view of, okay, if I didn't know anything about any of these subjects yet, would this book teach me? And in those cases, the answer is no, especially since there is no citation, no resources given, no bibliography. So like, where would you even go? You would have to just Google it at that point. And when that is the majority of materials that are coming out now, my basic thought is, why is that material coming out? If it's not telling you anything, it's not helping you do any research, there are plenty of other books that already talk about all of those things. So I know one of the reasons is that a lot of things that are coming out now are prettier and they have cuter, more hip, this new style of illustration, which is cute as fuck. Like, I love art in all forms. So different art appeals to different people, different styles appeal to different people for sure. If you notice, there's a lot of new books coming out that are really pretty, and everybody loves putting pictures of them online because they look so cool. And it's almost like you want to own it just because it's a pretty object, not because it's an actual source of information. And that's kind of how the books are treating themselves. Like, they make sure that they're pretty and they look nice and they're full of spells that you can do in 5 minutes or less, but they're not really concerned with teaching you why you're doing them or anything that is behind that. And someone mentioned to me recently that they have noticed some books coming out now that are actually just repackaged versions of older books. Like, some publishing houses are taking older texts about paganism and witchcraft and republishing them with new illustrations and new covers that are prettier and in this new style that's popular. And they're selling like crazy because they're pretty now, but it's the same information we've already had on the market. And like, some people have even told me they've picked up one of these books thinking it's a new book and then realized it's a book they already have on their shelves. But it works both ways, right? A lot of people are really into the new cute style and they want that. They want everything to be pretty and modern and clean and sleek and colorful, whatever it may be. Other people are really drawn to the old antique style. I came across someone recently in my internet travels that we had a discussion because someone had recently recommended a book to them that they didn't really want to read because the cover turned them off, because the cover of the book was very bright and happy and superficial looking in their mind. It was like bright colors, bold colors, very, simplistic, very modern, and that's not something they're into. So they weren't really sure about the book. They ended up reading it and loved it. Now, I happened to see a post that they made about it, and it's a book that I recently read, but I read a copy that was available through the Cleveland Public Library system that was old as hell and really beat up. Like, you could tell this book has been around the block more than a couple times in the decades since it has come out. The version that this person was recommended and was given was a new edition, a new printing with a new fancy pretty cover. The one that I had read was old. It looked like some old falling apart wallpaper, and it looked like it belonged in your grandma's house in the best way, because I love things like that. Not everybody does. And it was just falling apart. It was so beat up. So I sent this person a picture of the book that I had read. And I was like, this is the original cover. This is the version that I read. And they said, oh my gosh, see, like, that's a book that I would pick up. That book looks like it's taking itself seriously. It's old, it's got history. So it works both ways. Some people don't like these new modernized covers because it comes along with a sense of being not as substantial. And I think that's because there are some books coming out now that have this new style that are not as substantial as the older texts that we have that are written by our community elders, so to speak, our communal elders. And yeah, so that's just a pattern that I'm noticing. A lot of things don't explain why. They're more concerned with, so I watch the Great British Baking Show. It's called the Great British Baking Show in the US, but I believe in Britain it's called the Great British Bake Off. I love that show. And they always make a big deal about style and substance. They don't want you to have style without the substance. In other words, if they ask you to make something really beautiful and pretty, it's not enough to just be beautiful and pretty. It also has to taste good and be delicious and wonderful and substantial. So style over substance is a phrase that they use in that show, and that's what I keep thinking of when I see some of these books. I'm like, it's got style. It's got style. I'm not seeing the substance. And so if I were a judge on that show, I would give you a style over substance. That's what I would do. And that's not saying that it's bad to like this style. Like I said, I love art of all kinds. And I've seen some people recently posting about like reassuring people that just because you like these beautiful things and fancy, shiny, new things doesn't make you any less of a witch. And So I feel the need also in this video to address that point, that at least for me and a lot of the people that I've been discussing this with, that's absolutely not something that we think. We're not, if you're a witch, you're a witch, and you're allowed to like any kind of style you want. You can be a goth witch, you can be a hippie witch, you can be a, real naturey, elven style witch, you can be a medieval witch, you can be a punk witch, a scene witch, an emo witch, boho witch. I don't know, all of these things. I don't think that's a proper term that I should use. It is a style term, though. You can be a minimalist witch, you can be a modernist witch, you can be an impressionist witch. You get the point. You can be a witch and have any style you want, just like people have all different types of styles. You can be a preppy witch, whatever. All of these names that we give to style. If you're a witch, you're a witch. It doesn't matter what style you're into. What we have been talking about, what I have been talking about with people, is not that there are witches who enjoy these different styles. The issue that we have is things that are focusing on the style rather than the religion, rather than the spiritual path, that are marketed toward often specifically young girls, but also older women and men and otherwise are into these styles. But I feel like a lot of the time it tends to be marketed toward young girls, people who are already into a certain style. And so if these types of materials that are coming out now that are not as substantial, that are not explaining, that are not citing their sources, and they're not really teaching much, if these are the sources that are being given to a whole new generation, if you will, of beginner witches, that's the issue that we have, is that certain materials are teaching a style, not a religion or a spiritual path. I say that and I make that distinction because I know that not everyone considers it a religion. A lot of people still have very strong associations of the word religion as meaning only Abrahamic religions, which I've talked about on the past on my channel. Abrahamic religions do not have a monopoly on the word religion, although I know it seems like it because just how society works. It seems like whenever people say religion is like this, and I don't like religion because religion is like this, they're normally talking about Abrahamic religions or specifically Christianity. In reality, those are far from the only religions. And Wicca specifically is recognized as a religion in the United States. We have all the rights that go along with that and the legal protections that come with being a religion. And so I personally feel like it's harmful to ourselves to deny that we are a religion, because if people say, people want to talk about religious tolerance, religious freedom, religious protections under the law, but then if we say, oh, but we're not a religion, then what's to stop people from saying, oh, well, then if you're not a religion, then none of this legal rights and laws and protections and stuff, none of that applies to you if you're not a religion, right? I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but that's how words work. And so I do consider my path and what I do, it's my religion. It is. It's a religion and it's a spiritual path. Even people who are not theistic and people who really concentrate on witchcraft as a craft, there are people for whom witchcraft is their tradition, witchcraft is their religion, even if they are not of a specific tradition of the craft. That's something that I learned from my viewers on YouTube years ago. And so that's a thing. So a couple of the other things that I've noticed about these, I've already mentioned half of the stuff on my list, so we're doing good. A lot of these books, like I said, they're quick. They want to give you quick and dirty spell. Here's a spell, say these words, do this thing, you're doing magic. The other thing is that a lot of them open with here's the stuff you need. They start with the items that you need to collect and the items that you need to have. And that's a thing that we talk about all the time within our network of people on the internet and in life. We talk about, buying things and getting things as gifts and what's okay and what's not. People have different teachings. I've talked about this before too. I believe that the reason that we tell a lot of beginners, especially younger people, that it's better to get things as gifts is only to deter people from going out and spending a bunch of money and buying a bunch of things before you actually know why you need them or what to do with them, whether or not you're going to like it, whether or not you personally feel like you're going to need it for your work, right? It's not like a college course where they tell you you have to buy these 3 textbooks and this type of notebook and this type of pen and this type of eraser, which happened to me once because I took a landscape architecture related class and we were doing sketches, so there was a specific type of eraser I needed to buy. It's not like that where you're like, okay, you need to have all these things on this checklist and go spend a bunch of money before you can start witchcraft, right? So a lot of these books are starting with the stuff you need, and they're not saying you don't actually need the things, right? We like to work with things, witches work with things, we like tools, we like to have stuff, but they're tools, and you can start studying and practicing without them. So it's just a pattern that I've noticed, that a lot of these books start with the stuff you need before they ever tell you why you need them or what you're going to do with them. Just an observation. And then also, they tend to repeat things over and over. And this is something that I have witnessed and observed, and also something that I have repeatedly heard from other people telling me about books that they're reading, is that some of these books seem to have like 1 or 2 points, maybe 3 points that they're really trying to get across in the book, and they just say it 20 different times. Like, a lot of these books don't need to be as long as they are to actually get across the points that they're trying to make. I particularly have witnessed sometimes that the spells are even copy and pasted. I have gone through some books and thought that I was going crazy and was rereading the same page over and over because they literally copy and pasted the same spell from another page in the book and changed maybe 1 or 2 things. And so to me, I'm like, why did that need its own page? Why didn't you just put a little note at the end of the spell the first time saying, for this slight variation, do it this way. Or for this slight variation, you can use this ingredient instead of this ingredient and do the same thing. But instead, they copy and paste the same spell 10 pages later in the book. And then 30 pages later in the book, you get another set of 2 that are the exact same thing. I'm like, I'm going crazy. Why? Why is this? And other people have told me that they've seen that too. So that's a thing. Yeah, that's it. That's my whole list. Other than the fact that I feel like I need to stop using the term that I used to use for sources and materials that just like give you a list of things you need and a paragraph of words to say, and boom, you're doing witchcraft immediately, even if you've never studied it before and never practiced it before. Here you go. You don't have to know why you're doing it or how magic works or anything. Just say the words, tie the knot, and you're good to go. I used to call them insta-witch spells. By that, I mean like instant, just add water kind of thing. Like, just add magic, insta-witch, right? But now when you say insta-witch, it means you're a witch on Instagram. So times are changing. But yeah, so I used to call that kind of thing insta-witch. And now that means something else. So let me know your thoughts, I guess. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But yeah, that's just kind of my general feelings about stuff. And I just feel like if there are new resources being written and published, they should be better than the old sources in some way other than just that they're pretty. Because like I said, there are old sources that are getting makeovers and being republished with prettier covers, and that seems to be making them do well. So if all we need is to give them a prettier cover, why can't we just use the old books that are wonderful and full of information and really explain things? And, why do we need these new things that skim the surface and like barely teach you anything, and they cost so much money? Which is why I also recommend use your public library system. Yay, libraries. Because at least then you get to read through it and see if you like it before you spend money on it. Because it's just crazy, You spend money on something and then it doesn't even teach you anything. Why? So yeah, I feel like there was something else I wanted to say. I have a knot in the pit of my stomach right now. Like, I know as soon as I turn off the camera, I'm going to remember what it was. But it's not happening. Oh, just other things like I don't need to read or purchase sources that are exclusionary for really not a lot of reason, or things that continue to use racial slurs or culturally appropriative things that we've known are problematic for years, and new authors and new sources are still perpetuating them. Like, I understand that there's a lot of people who still don't comprehend these issues and or don't care about them, and that's their personal choice. But like, for me personally, if there's an issue I care a lot about that an author doesn't care a lot about and ignores in their book, then especially if the book isn't actually teaching you anything and like isn't explaining and is not a good resource that I would recommend, I don't need that. There's already plenty of other books that actually teach you things without being exclusionary or without using racial slurs or without unnecessarily appropriating things or, whatever. I know that gets complicated when we're talking about religion that really draws from a lot of places, but there are new sources coming out that don't do any of those things and are fantastic. So I would much rather go to those than the ones that do the problematic things and also aren't that great of sources. That's just this witch's opinion. Over and out. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.